Hi, everyone. Yeah, we were here last year speaking about FOSS licensing when it comes to code, and so we decided to spread this a bit with a lot of AI licensing and other licensing coming up, and obviously confusing people because we get a lot of questions. So expect a thorough overview over everything that you can see in terms of FOSS licensing with regard to different artifacts. We're trying to make this a bit interactive, so please feel free to ask your questions whenever they come up, so we don't have to lecture you. We want to interact with you and know what interests you. I'm Lina. I'm a FOSS lawyer since, I think, around 20 years or so. I started my PhD in FOSS licensing and have been doing that ever since. And I started working in the field of AI licensing when AI came up, like about 3 years ago or so. And it's getting more and more interesting, and I want to share some of my insights with you together with Angelika.
Yes, and hello from my side. I'm Angelika. I'm an independent open source consultant. I am supporting open source projects and companies and industry collaborations to do their work right. So I'm in deep collaboration with Lina. I'm working directly with the developers as they often are not that confident about what to do exactly when doing open source. So that's what I'm doing. And so let's step in. So as Lina mentioned last year, we were here and talked about open source contributions. This year, we want to talk about non-code artifacts and AI. So why? So if you have an open source project, it's about code, of course, it's software, but it's also about non-code. So you have documentations, you have specifications, you have images, graphics, you have fonts, and these are embedded in a variety of things, like PDFs as documentation, you have web pages, you have graphical user interfaces. So we want to create some kind of awareness that also these things have some legal requirements, and that you should also be sure about what doing with these things. And of course, we all know these non-code artifacts like code cannot be only self-created or third-party. They can also be partly AI-generated.
Who of you is working with AI in their daily business? Okay, expectable. Who of you cares about licensing when it comes to using AI? Wow, you all listened last year, great.
Okay, just to give some examples, maybe you have this definitely in your repositories folders like an assets folder. In these folders, you can generally find something like icons, your fonts, logos, local things. And just as an example, let's have to look to one logo here. It's an SVG logo icon, and it's self-created because there is a .license file next to the image. Why next to the image? Because it's really hard to put your license and copyright information into the image. So this is just one way you can do it. There are several other ways to do it. This is one of the ways recommended from reuse software. Just to give an example, what's in a file like this, or you can also put it in your notice file or README file. So when it comes to the licenses, where to put them? So we have another example. So for example, we have a source folder and a docs folder. And you can see we have a license and we have a license non-code. So the green license on the right side in the metadata, we can see it's Apache 2.0. So this is the default code license for this repository. But there is another license it's called license non-code. And you can see in this repository, there is next to the code license, a non-code license, and in this case, it's the CC BY 4.0.
As you can see, we're starting slow with the artifacts that are not AI, but you will see in the next slide that all of this applies to AI models as well.
Yeah, here we I'm sure everybody of you heard about DeepSeek model or about DeepSeek, which is said to be open source. And in this repository, you can also see two licenses. It's the license code and the license model. And if you look into the metadata data on the right side, you can see the MIT, which is definitely the license, the code license. And then you have something like unknown licenses found, which is interesting because it said DeepSeek is open source. So what does that mean? And in the end, what is open source AI? So I will ask my lawyer about that.
Coming to it, if you see that in a repository for an AI model, make sure that you actually read both licenses, because I've seen some of these licensing schemes where you have a code license that's copylefted, that's a GPL or so, and you have a model license that covers code as well. So you always have to check carefully which license applies to which code and what the code is actually doing to avoid copyleft effects. FOSS is a picture generating tool, for example, has a GPL and an AI license that covers code as well. So that can be a bit difficult in practice. But what is open source AI? I'm pretty sure that most of you have heard about the discussion of the open source initiative. They started like around 2 or 3 years ago. And discovered that open source code does not necessarily mean that an open source coded AI model or system is open source as well, if open source is understood as the most transparent and collaborative way to publish artifacts, whatever they may be. And that's when they started to extrapolate the requirements of the open source definition, which is 10 requirements. I'm sure all of you know this definition, but just to summarize, it's 10 requirements that say what the license has to do in order to be called an open source license within the common definition. And this was extrapolated to AI and to the artifacts that are part of an AI system or an AI model. As you can see here, it's not 10 points, it's only 4 points, which is mainly because we don't really know yet how the black box in the AI is working technically, and therefore we do not know what to do and what to say in order to make this as transparent as an open source code would be. And that's why it's mainly a summary of the main principles that have to be obtained in order to make it as open as possible, which is you have to be able to use it, you have to be able to study it, which means that at least the code that's in there has to be open. You have to be able to modify it, to train it yourself, but also to modify the code and the parameters and the weights and so on. And you have to be able to share it via a repository or what have you. These requirements apply to all parts of an AI system or model, which is the model itself, the code in the model, the weights, the parameters, and all the other structural elements that you would have in an AI model. We had a closer look because we wanted to talk about non-code licensing today. If we have an AI model or AI system, of course, a lot of it is code. But we do not want to talk about the code because that's quite clear for all of us. We tried to summarize what artifacts we have in the surrounding of an AI system which are not code. And that would be, of course, the data and databases with which a model is trained, for example. It's the weights and other parameters that are used to keep the system working. And of course, it's the input and the output, which brings us back to Angelika's part, pictures, text, whatever you have. These are the 3 elements we would like to talk about when it comes to licensing, because those of you who know me know that most of my lectures start with, why do I need a license? Because what you want to use belongs to someone else. It's protected by some sort of IP law. The same applies it does not only apply to code, but also to other artifacts, like icons. They are protected by copyright as pictures. Sometimes they are trademarks. AI models is a bit of a difficult thing because we don't know yet if they will be protected by an IP right, be it copyright, be it something else. What we can say is that parts of it are copyrighted, the code, databases, stuff like that. We don't know about the whole thing. That's still under a legal discussion. Documentation is most of the times text, so protected by copyright. Databases can be protected by an actual copyright if they achieve a certain level of creativity, or the investment, if someone put a lot of effort in collecting and structuring the data, that is also a right where you can you have certain proprietary rights in the database. The data itself is not protected by no IP right. Still, oftentimes data is sold as business secrecy, stuff like that, or the database as the structural element, and the creativity in the structural element is something that can be licensed. So when we go back to AI and what we now know about IP protection, I very often get asked the question, if I create a picture with Stable Diffusion, or if I create a text with a text model, who owns it, the output? And the answer is, as always, when it comes from a lawyer, it depends. I have to say that once, every time. It depends, and it depends on how much of the actual user of the AI system is still visible and expressed in the output. So if you just have a simple model where you put in some numbers and it gives you like an Excel sheet or something, it's most probably not protected at all. And if it's protected, it does not belong to you because you don't put any creative effort in it. But if you have, for example, an artist, most of you probably know Refik Anadol, he does huge pictures with AI and trains the models himself in order to obtain a certain effect in the picture. They're moving pictures, very impressive. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. In that case, you can say, okay, the output is owned by the person who trained the AI system and who put the data in the AI system and used the AI system as a means to create something. So if it's just like your pencil when you draw the AI system, then the output can be owned by you. If it's not, it's probably not protected. With regard to patent law, it's a bit different. There is already the first court decision saying that an AI can make inventions, which is quite stunning, actually, but it cannot be entered into the patent register as the inventor. That has to be a natural person, i.e. a name of a person. Exactly.
Lina?
Yeah.
Kind.
So in the case of this artist creating pictures where you say they could be protected, is it also that this AI system is the AI system of the artist, or is it publicly accessible, which he tries to train?
He, in that case, I think he uses different ones and creates them himself. But it could also be the case if you use an open source system and instrumentalize it, just as you might use a pencil that has been made by someone else in order to create your own work. It always depends on how much of your own creativity goes into the output. And or if everything is done by the AI and you're not like steering it, but just letting it do what it does, then it's not yours, it's no one's, probably. Exactly. So very good point. Speaking about using AI and using OpenAI and AI models that you can find on GitHub and everywhere else, Hugging Face, for example, you need a license, and there always are licenses to be found. When I'm correct, what I've seen in the last 1 or 2 years, it's 3 categories of licenses. One of them is relatively new. The other ones are a little bit older. One is like simple code licensing. You can find whole models under MIT. I will tell you in a second why that's not ideal and puts us lawyers in difficulties sometimes. Then you have, I call them Llama 2 style licenses, but they're like what most commercial AI, open AI companies use. It's licenses that allow free use up to a certain revenue threshold of the company. So if you have more than like 200K worldwide, you are not allowed to use the model. You have to obtain a commercial license. And they have like a list of allowed or not allowed things you are not allowed to do with the model. So it's restricted and it's not open source within the sense we are using the word. And the third category is open rail licensing. that's a bit similar to CC licensing, Creative Commons licensing, which Angelika will talk about in a second a bit more. It's different modules that are used for AI licensing that try to make sure that the model or system is as open as possible. It's very similar to what we know as open source licensing. Which means if you yourself would like to license non-code artifacts, you have 4 open categories of licensing that you can use and that you have to, or that you should use when you want your stuff to be open, which is for AI models, it's the open rail licensing, which I just mentioned. For code, it's the good old open source licensing. For documentation, pictures, and so on, CC licensing is a very recommendable tool. And for databases, there's the open database license, which is, for example, used by OpenStreetMap. I said earlier, if you use code licensing for AI models or non-code artifacts, it's not ideal. This is an MIT license, as most of you probably noticed. I just wanted to highlight it a bit, that you have to be careful when you just say, okay, MIT is a very permissive license, I'm just going to use that for the whole model I created, it's going to work anyways. It will, but if you read the license, it's very restricted to software. It only says software and documentation, which means the code documentation. The rights of use mentioned in the license are the software rights of use. There's different rights of use, different wording in the German Copyright Act for software and other kinds of works. And most important, the warranty disclaimer only covers software by wording. So that puts everyone who wants money from you in a good position to say, yeah, only excluded liability for software, but not for all the rest. So that's not very recommendable. And this also applies the other way around. If you use a CC license, I think many of you have encountered that problem. The requirements it makes in order to keep it open and allow further usage always requires you disclose the whole source code and to make it available at any time someone is using the code. So it's very difficult practically to offer that. It works, you can make a written offer or something, but it's not ideal, and it means that you have to shift the rights of use a bit and stuff like that. So whenever you license yourself, check what kind of artifact you have, and then check what licenses are available that allow you the same freedom as a code license would. Just as simple as that. And whenever you use IP-protected artifacts, make sure you know the license and that you can keep up with the license conditions. Over to Angelika for the practical part.
Okay, so we heard a lot of different things up to now. So let's look a little bit closer what to do in concrete. So what we just spoke about, we have 2 aspects we have to decide about. The one is, what do I have in my hands? So is it text, images, it's an AI model, so be aware of that. And the other thing is, where does it come from? So did you create it you yourself? Or is it a third-party artifact? Or is it an AI output? So Lina just mentioned, if I have text or images, we highly recommend to use CC licenses. Provide the legal information in the document. If not possible, because of images or things like this, put the information in the document where embedded, or if it's standalone, put the notices in the notice file or an extra file. For databases, provide the legal information, and also for the AI models, like we saw before in the DeepSeek repository. So choosing the license is very important at that point. If it comes to third-party content, I just wrote obey the license, but first is identify the license or identify the terms of use. If you just download some images or audios or something, identify the terms of use and check if it's compatible to what you have in your open source project. Scan if possible. With text, it's possible. And put the attributions in the document or in a notice file. What is also very important, always put the information in the documents, not only in your repositories, because it has to make be available for the user who has the document. And when it comes to web pages or graphical user interfaces, it's the same. So you have to have something in your help section or extra section where you list your attributions and your legal information. For example, in cars, maybe you already have seen there's also, for example, I know it from BMW, on the screen there's a special section where you can go in and look at the attributions which open source software is used in that BMW. Very funny. And when it comes to AI output, Lina just explained it's not so easy with the output. So I just said, check the IP. Yeah, and if you made it or you made the AI do it, and if you're sure you have the rights, okay. If not, and you think there are no legal problems, then just make a transparency remark.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One bonus point is obey the AI Act, which is already partly enforced, but will the most of the obligations come in force next year, and one of them is transparency obligations. So you have every output that an AI system creates, be it deepfakes or whatever, has to be marked as created by AI. You can already see that in a lot of social media. Exactly, and when a third party, a customer or so is interacting with an AI system, they also need to know that they're interacting with an AI system and not a human being. So yeah, that's the transparency obligations in the AI Act.
Do you have some practical suggestions how to do that in detail, how to declare what parts of which part of the documentation or code has been created with the help or exclusively by AI or something? Because
it's really difficult.
Is there just a notice in the README that AI was involved in this repository enough? Or
yeah, it has to be machine readable. The commission or the jurisdictor in the EU has made it as difficult as possible. It has to be machine readable and readable by a human being who sees the output. So it's quite difficult. For code, it's not that difficult. You can just put it in comments. But when you distribute the code in binary, you have to find another way to show it. There is a lot of best practices creation going on at the moment on how to do that. From my personal perspective, it strongly depends on which sector are you in. It's different in a car than in an enterprise software, for example. But you can break it down to, okay, whenever a third party comes in contact with something that is AI created, it needs to be able to find out that it's AI created and not created by human. But there will be guidelines by the EU Commission sometime this year, hopefully. And then we all know better what they mean, hopefully. Okay, go.
Okay, so yeah, we said several times today that we recommend for non-code artifact the CC licenses. So just as a reminder for you, I think you are all aware of them. The CC licenses provide 4 rights you can choose from. So please be aware that only the attribution, the BI, and the share like SA are open source compatible. So in the other, there are restrictions in it, like non-commercial, which is not suitable for an open source project. There are also national and international licenses. Also here, for an open source project, choose the international variants, because a national variant is a restriction. So that doesn't fit very good with open source projects. And maybe you know the license chooser from CC. That is a very nice wizard where can you go through which requirements you have, and then they make a recommendation.
The OpenRail model is not as far as the CC model, but it works similarly. So you can just check it out. Further questions?
Thank you so much.
That was first, and then...
Yeah, just a reminder that you can also submit your questions via the website.
OpenRail, you mentioned, do you know if that is compatible with or if OSI specifically thinks that that's compatible with their model for open source. Okay, you don't. Okay.
When you're asking, you know that it's not.
Well,
it's not, but these are two developments that like started parallelly, and I'm pretty sure it will merge at one point. But at the moment, there is the open AI definition and the open rail licensing, and it's not really like this. It has not the exact same criteria. So that's a very good point. Yeah, that's true.
Great talk. I'm from Apache Software Foundation. We had lots of discussions. I'm a member of the security committee about the upcoming CRA and all the regulations. And there is one thing that you haven't covered, and maybe that's a good idea for next year talk, which we discussed, is about SBOM and vulnerability exchange information. This doesn't fall in any of the buckets that you mentioned, and it is still something that is expected from us to publish, like information which vulnerabilities are affecting our software or not. And we had lots of discussion, like which license, like what's the promise we give to our users when we are publishing this information, on what kind of license it is, because it's neither code nor data nor any of those things that you mentioned or images. It's metadata, information that we publish. Yeah. Any thoughts about that?
So you mean the licensing of the information, right? When you publish the information. It's true, it's a different topic. We left that out intentionally because the whole Cyber Resilience Act topic is a huge one for next year, because then everything will come in force, and then we will probably talk about that. For the time being, for the information to be published, I would say if it's protectable, which it might be under a database right or copyright, a CC license is always a good idea. And you can, as Angelika pointed out, find out which one suits you best and which one, how close you want to keep the information. But that's...
One second. So online also they hear you.
Just to clarify, because part of the license is the rights to use, but also what do we promise? Like what is our liability for the information we publish?
Yeah, but that's not so much a question of the license, legally speaking, but more a question of your statutory obligations coming from the Act itself. So the Act requires you to publish certain information, and you're required to do that completely and correctly. And if you don't do that, you're liable from the Act and not from the license. So you cannot exclude liability through the license when there is a statutory regulation telling you to do something. So you cannot give them wrong information and say we're not liable, because the Act is stronger than the license.
Just one last question.
It's not a question, it's an add-on. So I'm from Siemens, I'm a license compliance guy, and we discussed it with our lawyers, what do we do with the SBOMs? And we decided for CC0.
Well done.
Yeah, because we need to provide the information, we want to provide the information, and this is what we show with this license.
Yeah, and the CC0 is also the license used by SPDX themselves, so that makes absolute sense to do that, yeah.
Thank you so much.
We're here all day. I will be in a few calls in between, but we're here all day, so if you have any further questions, just go ahead, and you have the email addresses there, so please feel free to write at any time.
Thank you so much, Angelika and Lina.
Thank you.
Thank you.